Well, good evening. This is Mayor Stewart, and I would like to call this special meeting of the City Council to order and state that all council members are present through teleconferencing. Councilmember Marks, will you lead the council in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. As this is a special meeting, we will only be taking public comments on the two items on the agenda. The public comment will be after the staff presentation and council questions for each item. The first item is the public hearing, open space winter evening hours of use at Cerro Llanos Natural Preserve. Would staff present the report?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. We're here tonight to continue the open space winter evening hours of use item from the October 19th meeting. And as I said, at that meeting, we continue to follow all of the appropriate policies and processes as dictated by the direction that we've received from Council on this item. In this case in particular, that included additional analysis of public comment that we received in advance of the October 19th meeting. That information is before you tonight, and we certainly welcome any direction from the Council regarding the program this evening. I would also ask that our City Attorney briefly clarify for the Council and community the scope of the public comment portion for tonight's item, as the public hearing was closed at the previous meeting. So with that, I'll hand it over to our City Attorney and then Sustainability and Natural Resources Official Bob Hill for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Herman, Mayor and Council. We did close the formal public hearing, the legal public hearing on this item, and therefore conclude the submission of significant new information into the public hearing at last week's meeting. However, given that there has been additional information distributed to the council majority, in fact, the council entirety, we will allow public comment on that new information consistent with the parameters of the Brown Act, but the public hearing remains closed, and this meeting is the continuance to allow for council deliberation and direction and action if appropriate.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Again, I'm Bob Hill, your Sustainability and Natural Resources Official. Thank you, Greg, for your introductory comments, and also City Attorney Dietrich as well. Mayor and Council, good evening. I just would like to thank you for the opportunity of the continuation of this meeting. I understand that all of us have a lot of things that we're doing in our lives, and so really appreciate the opportunity of this special meeting, and thank you for making that accommodation to continue this item. So this evening, I have a relatively short presentation, really to cover the matters that were that we wanted to place under further review and evaluation from our last meeting on this item, which occurred on October 19th, 2021. As before, I am honored to have with us other staff members, Shauna Scott, our environmental coordinator, also Doug Karskaden, our supervising ranger, and Greg Gavakian, the Parks and Recreation director, as well as the consultant team from Rincon Consultants, Nicole West, who's the senior project manager, as well as Colby Boggs, who is the one of the principals of the firm here in the San Luis Obispo office. With that, I'm going to share my screen and get started with the slideshow presentation. Very good. Can everybody see the presentation here? Hear me okay? All right. In review, we went over this last time. The recommendation following City Council direction is to introduce an ordinance that would amend Chapter 12.22 of our open space regulations which are codified in municipal code to allow a special program for winter evening hours of use at Cerro San Luis Obispo Natural Reserve only, and to approve a resolution entitled "A Resolution of the City of San Luis Obispo adopting a negative declaration for winter evening hours of use at Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve." Again, as Greg mentioned and Christine elaborated on, this is a continuation from the meeting on October 19th, 2021. And at that regularly scheduled meeting, staff presented the item. The City Council, as you'll recall, of course, asked questions, called for public comment, deliberated on the item, and concluded with a majority vote to close the public hearing with specific direction to staff and continue the item to November 9th this evening in order to provide staff time to evaluate materials timely submitted at the public hearing and evaluate whether such information warranted reopening the public hearing or if further action was warranted. That council direction from October 9th specifically was to require the permit system that we first established under the pilot program for this project during all program months when daylight saving time is not in effect, rather than following the prior council direction from the study session that occurred last March to utilize the permitting system during the month of December only. This council will recall we discussed how staff had recommended utilizing the permitting system during all program months because it would be administratively much easier on staff and also a much easier task in terms of communication with the public should we need to change course in that scenario. So the ordinance that is before you tonight and the resolution that is before you tonight reflect that change as directed. Lastly, we were also specifically asked to continue with notification to the Northern Chumash Tribal Council. We had discussed the communication we received first from Fred Collins, who was tribal administrator at the time and has since sadly passed away. And we discussed at the meeting on the 19th the further correspondence we received from Violet Sage Walker, who is the current tribal administrator for the Northern Chumash Tribal Council. And there was clearly a desire on the part of the majority of council to continue in that notification process and to make sure that they were aware that the meeting was being continued, that there were further opportunities for them to comment and provide any clarification they might be interested in providing to the city council about their point of view. And really that correspondence was simply to lodge their opposition to the program. I both left a voicemail for Violet Sage Walker as well as sent her email notifying of this meeting this evening. However, I did not receive any correspondence back from her. It is noteworthy, however, that since the publication of the agenda for this meeting on November 9th this evening, that we did receive 2 pieces of written correspondence from the Yaktitichu, the Northern Chumash tribe, from Wendy Lucas and Mona Olivas Tucker, where they similarly have provided correspondence where they state their opposition to the program. It's important to note, however, that we do not interpret that, and it didn't appear that they were wanting to engage with the city council as it relates to tribal consultation and tribal resources, as would be allowed for under Assembly Bill 52. Why are we here tonight? Why did we continue the meeting? And as we discussed last time, we did receive several pieces of key correspondence, written correspondence that brought forward key issues and information that we felt as staff warranted further evaluation and review. And in summary, while we received a lot of correspondence, many members of the public chose to address the city council and let them know they're broadly in favor of this program. Many members of the public have written to the city council and have let the council know that they're broadly opposed to the program. We really focused on those that were bringing forward new substantive information that would be important for us to evaluate in the context of CEQA. And in general, in summary, those key issues included first, the establishment of the baseline level of use for the program. And as council will recall, a key component of our program is that we have a permitting system, and that permitting system is designed to hold, basically to keep the existing level of use at baseline. And there were also questions about the sufficiency of how we derived that data using the eco-counter device that was done as part of an open space survey in partnership with California Polytechnic State University and the City Regional Planning Department. There were broadly some comments regarding the scope of our project description and the focus solely on the 118-acre Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve. And the question about is the project potentially inviting use of private lands that are not part of the city's own Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve, that are not owned or controlled by the city. And that there were also in that public comment indications that unauthorized access points in neighborhoods were being used, and that our analysis perhaps should have considered that as well. Lastly, we had several pieces of correspondence that identified new academic research studies in the biological sciences field and so forth, in journals that that we had not evaluated and were new since the pilot program that we first started in 2018. Also, was brought to our attention that the state of California, through their the Department of Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, had published a report that contained several studies, and that report deals with impacts to wildlife from what they call non-consumptive recreation. In response to these comments, we again reached out to the consultant team at Rincon. Two memoranda were prepared by Rincon in response to comments for further evaluation and review, as they were germane to these comments that were received. And in conclusion, Rincon consultants indicates that they did not find anything in their review that would cause them to suggest that we should recirculate the initial study or change the conclusions of the initial study based on their review of those comments. That memoranda that I've just mentioned is included with the council agenda report tonight this evening as attachments D and E. So I wanted to spend a few moments on each of these topics here, and they are further described in the staff report. So regarding the establishment of baseline, we did receive comments that raised concerns about the proposed use of 65 individuals per day that was at first established during the pilot program. In particular, regarding the establishment of baseline, it's important to note that recent case law confirms that lead agencies, such as the City of San Luis Obispo, when they're administering the California Environmental Quality Act, can use their discretion to determine a baseline as long as they justify and provide support on the selection of that baseline. This case law in particular here specifically states, and I'll read it because it seems pertinent here, the agency must select a baseline based on actual conditions rather than hypothetical possibilities. There is, however, no single fixed method for measuring actual conditions. Measuring peak impacts may be appropriate under the right circumstances. The agency enjoys discretion to decide how to measure actual conditions. As I had stated in our staff report during the pilot program, as well as in the staff report for the October 19th, 2021 hearing, the history of the establishment is, where does the number 65 come from? I think that's the essence of the public comment, and what is the support for that? And what happened is, council may recall in 2015 through 17, open space was a major city goal. And as we sought to begin to develop the work plans and to work on that major city goal, one of the things we realized is we had very little data about our open space network in general. We didn't know how many people were using which open spaces and which ones were the most popular. We also had a chance to conduct site surveys and do in the field surveys with open space users to understand what things were important to them. So for example, we started to install trash containers and leashes and increased informational signage. And as part of that, we started to use what's called an eco-counter device, an infrared device that tracks people when they cross through that boundary. And we deployed the eco-counter device at Bishop Peak. We employed it at Johnson Ranch Open Space, and we also employed it during winter months at Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve in the winter of 2014 through 2015. And it's important to note, as in the comments, the open space survey that the Natural Resources Program did in partnership with California Polytechnic State University and City Regional Planning Department with Dr. William Riggs, did not necessarily anticipate or contemplate the winter evening hours of use program. That is not why we were counting people who were using it. We were simply interested in knowing how many people were using various different open spaces. What we did, however, have was data from that occasion that specifically counted the number of people that were going into Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve and the number of people that were exiting the reserve. The eco counter device counts, goes 24 hours a day and includes and tallies data through every 15-minute interval. So over the course there from December until the end of March, between 2014 and 15, there are over 10,000 records of individuals entering and exiting Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve. And in summary, we were able to really zoom in on those hours that are after when open space would normally close. So 1 hour after sunset, until the hour when we had established might be a reasonable time for allowing the winter evening hours per use. And it is from that data where we derive the average daily baseline use of 65. I think one thing that's important to note, again, citing the court case, is that the agency has broad discretion how to choose to do this. One could look at the data and interpret it, I'm sure, in myriad different ways. However, we chose to take an approach that we felt was conservative, and particularly by using average daily baseline use instead of the peak level of use. Our intent was to be conservative in this manner. And so ultimately, our feeling is that the establishment of baseline is based, there is a rational basis for it. It's based on that survey data, and that the way that we've interpreted that data is ultimately is a conservative approach to this particular matter. In addition, one of the things that we recognized from that, and it is also clear in testimony from numerous occasions when we've been talking about winter evening hours of use, whether it be through the preparation of the pilot program or the study session last March, or even in council's correspondence received today regarding this matter. We have members of the public that are stating, I've been doing this for many years, and one commenter said over 20 years. And yet our open space regulations, as promulgated, again, open space is closed 1 hour after sunset. And so we know both through our own data and also through testimony provided by members of the public, that there have been individuals that have been accessing Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve in evening hours during the winter, despite our open space regulations. Strictly in the sense of CEQA and how it applies here, it's also very clear in case law that the lead agency does not have the obligation to go backwards in time, or quote unquote turn back the clock to that time prior to when these circumstances first started to arise. And so again here, and I quote, characterizing the baseline where the existing conditions are the result of illegal activity, including activity inconsistent with an existing permits, was addressed in existing court cases. And in those cases noted that the preparation of a CEQA document is not a forum for determining the nature and consequences of the prior illegal contact that occurred without a permit. The lead agency must evaluate impacts against actual conditions existing at the time of CEQA review, and are not expected to turn back the clock and evaluate impacts compared to baseline conditions that predate the illegal activity. So here, the baseline of 65 individuals was established based on our use of the eco counter and the open space survey, and the actual use that has been occurring here, despite those winter evening hours of use. Regarding offsite impacts to surrounding private lands, it's always been the case from the first time that we went through the steps leading up to the pilot program when we were doing the site selection, where might be the most appropriate place to implement council's direction to establish a winter evening hours of use program. And we looked at, again, to refresh a variety of different sites. And we ultimately concluded that we didn't want to use a property that was located tangent and adjacent to some of our larger wildlife migration corridors, such as the Stenner Springs property located adjacent to Los Padres National Forest. So we also didn't want to use our Irish Hills Natural Reserve property, which is part of the larger Irish Hills ecosystem. Through council feedback and through our own assessment, we concluded we didn't want to use a property that where the trailhead was situated in a neighborhood and might create impacts to surrounding neighborhoods in the evening. And so ultimately we determined that Cerro San Luis would likely be the most appropriate location for this program because of its geographic location. It has trailhead parking. It's not located in an existing neighborhood. It's relatively straightforward emergency access should a need for that arise. And so it's always been very clear in our project descriptions and in our communication about this program that it was intended to apply to the Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve only, our 118-acre property, which has about 4.9 miles of trails. And so here, the commenters that issued their written comments to us suggest that we should have evaluated the entire mountain, all of Cerro San Luis, not just the property owned by the city. And I think that it's fairly well known that during the month of December, one of our neighboring property owners historically has installed holiday lighting at the basis on a private basis on the summit of Cerro San Luis Obispo. It's very visible from numerous vantage points and attracts visitation from members of the public. But the point that's important here is that for us as a city, we don't control or permit that installation of the holiday lighting. Furthermore, that location is not within the city's jurisdiction or scope of control. Nor have those private property owners asked us to assist with controlling trespass that may be arising from our property. And so in this regard, we continue to feel that the appropriate project description for our project that we're authorizing under our control is at the Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve only. Lastly, there were several new studies that were brought to light, as well as the state of California report that I mentioned already. We looked closely at those as well. And first and foremost, again, our approach to CEQA here is that we're holding the project to existing baseline and therefore net new impacts should not be occurring. However, nonetheless, we also addressed those pieces of academic literature. And in most cases, what we found is that there were oftentimes very generalized studies that were done in different locations, different habitats, different wildlife habitats. Sometimes during daylight hours, sometimes the studies wouldn't specify what hours they were done on. Sometimes they were done in different seasons, such as nesting bird season in the springtime. Nevertheless, I don't think that as staff or as the consultant team, it's been our position that impacts to wildlife cannot occur due to encroachment from humans, from noise and from light. Rather here that we're again holding to the existing baseline. And it's been fairly clear in our communications with academic experts in this topic locally that there's an extraordinary amount of existing ambient noise and light from US Highway 101, from downtown, from Cal Poly, from the Men's Colony and other surrounding areas. And in our correspondence with some of those biological experts, the feeling has been that in any incremental amount of additional noise and light from the winter evening hours of use would be negligible in comparison to the existing amount of noise and light that is occurring already in the in the environment. And in fact, in that correspondence, which was also addressed to council as well as to me, it's clear that really that we should be concerned about noise and light in general, and that we should be very interested in continuing to implement our noise ordinances and our night sky preservation ordinance, and helping to do what we can to control significant sources of external noise and light here. So again, those two pieces of memoranda are part of the council agenda report this evening. Again, before you tonight is an ordinance revision here to chapter 12.22.050B from our municipal code, where we add on additional language and underline here, notwithstanding the foregoing, the city may implement a special program at Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve only that allows for extended hours of use until 8:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when daylight savings time is not in effect. And that accompanying the ordinance tonight is also the city council resolution, which, excuse me, I should have corrected here to say that would be adopted on November 9th. And I'm confident that the resolution that we prepared does say that, and that resolution may be subsequently amended by the council, but would still need to be consistent with this environmental review document or subsequent documents. Lastly, one final note here: should the council choose to introduce the ordinance and approve the resolution in the recommendation, we would then schedule the second reading and a final adoption. We did understand that we will be able to do that and publish in time for a second reading that could occur on November 16th, should council desire to move forward this evening. Following that occasion, there would be an additional 30 days until that ordinance can go into final effect. And so therefore, the soonest that this program could be implemented this calendar year would be December 17th, 2021. Again, our recommendation is to introduce the ordinance that would amend Open Space Regulations 12.22 and to adopt a resolution adopting the negative declaration for the winter evening hours of use program. In terms of alternatives that would be available to council, of course, we don't want to preclude any alternative that council may deliberate on. However, in short, we considered that council may wish to direct staff to make changes to the resolution or the ordinance, which we could be prepared to do this evening if we wind up going there. Also, council could always choose to deny the project and direct us to take no further action on this program at all. And that concludes my staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do any of my colleagues have questions for Bob or Greg? I will now open the public comment. Please raise your hand if you would like to speak on this item. We'll be calling people at a time. So once your name is called, please look for a pop-up message and click the button on the message to be promoted to a panelist. That way you can actually provide your public comment. City Clerk, do we have people wishing to make public comment?
Madam Mayor, we do not have anyone raising their hand.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Madam Mayor. Having a little difficulty. I don't know if the other listeners are hearing your voice is a little muffled. So I just don't know if there's an opportunity for you to adjust your microphone just so that we can hear you better.
Yeah, I've been trying to say it, but can you guys hear me now?
I
Yeah.
hear you, Carlin, but I was
Okay, there was something wrong with my mic for a second, but anyway, yeah. Thanks, Derek.
How's my mic? Can you guys hear me?
Yours is clear again.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Okay, hopefully that helps. Thank you for the answer.
It's still a little muffled. Perhaps
Still?
we could, yeah, if you want to, Madam Mayor, maybe we can just take a quick technology break. I'm also fielding some texts from individuals who are having difficulty getting connected via Zoom. So I'm trying to help those folks and I've sent out a couple links. So if it's the pleasure of the mayor, we might want to take just a couple minute break, and perhaps IT can help you with your microphone.
Absolutely. I will, let's reconvene in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, I can hear no one though.
That's much better than
Okay.
it was.
Yeah,
You're
much
good.
better.
Okay,
Thank you.
cool. Great,
Good.
thank you.
And Madam Mayor,
Okay.
we need to call for public comment again for individuals who raise their hand. We had a little bit of a slip up, so I think we've got that all rectified. And so I think if you could call for comment per our discussion.
Sounds good, happy to do it. I see there's at least 2 raising their hands, so 1 second. All right, so I will now again open the public comment. Please raise your hand now if you would like to speak on this item, the public hearing of the open space winter evening hours of use at Cerro San Luis Natural Reserve. We'll be calling 2 people at a time. Once your name is called, please look for a pop-up message and click the button on the message to be promoted to a panelist. This way you can provide your public comment. City Clerk, do we have anyone wishing to make public comment?
We have 3 hands raised at this time. Oh, we
Great,
have 2
thank you.
hands raised. Sorry. Okay, our first one, I'm sorry, I'm gonna mess the name up. I can do the last name, Jovanovich.
Jovanovich, thank you.
And then the next one after this will be Janine Rands.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Stewart and council members for allowing public comment. My name is Yasna Jovanovich. My pronouns are she, her, and I stand with the Chumash and Violet Sage Walker of the Northern Chumash Council and Northern Chumash Tribe. I'm the director of Cal Poly's honors program and a professor of psychology and child development, and I've been a resident of San Luis Obispo for 16 years. Last year, I spearheaded a petition of over 300 residents, including Cal Poly students, who urged the mayor and city council to adopt the protection and maintenance of the city's natural reserves as an explicit major city goal for 2021-23. Today, I'm here to urge the mayor and city council to again prioritize the protection of our natural reserves by not permanently revising the open space regulations to allow extended hours of public use of Cerro San Luis. I acknowledge that this is likely a difficult decision for the council. As Councilmember Pease responded to me in an email, the council is working to find, and I quote, an appropriate balance of access and preservation, end of quote. People want to enjoy or recreate in our open spaces. I get that. But it is for this exact reason that people want what people want that we're in a climate crisis. It is up to us to make the hard choices, to sacrifice some of the things we want that ultimately are not helping our natural world. I would argue that we have already struck a balance, as Councilmember Pease seeks, by having access to our natural reserves for 12 hours. Let the flora and fauna have their 12 hours. As Cal Poly biology professor Clint Francis explained to me in speaking about Cerro San Luis, he said, and I quote, the areas adjacent to trails are already highly disturbed, and human presence on a trail is likely to have similar effects whether day or night. In other words, we as humans have already compromised the preservation of our natural reserves. Why would our city make a decision that only exacerbates it? The decision to extend the hours of hiking and biking in one of our natural reserves for a few hours might seem minor or negligible, as Bob Hill stated. But it's these seemingly minor decisions that have led us to this moment in time where our planet is in crisis. Yesterday, President Obama made a speech to the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow. His words resonated with me. He ended his speech this way, quote, our planet has been wounded by our actions. These wounds won't be healed today or tomorrow or the next, but they can be healed by degrees. And if we start with that spirit, if each of us can fight through the occasional frustration and dread, if we pledge to do our part and then follow through on those commitments, I believe we can secure a better future. We have to. And what a profound and noble task set for ourselves. I'm ready for the long haul, he said, so let's get to work. As mayor and city council, you have been tasked with the responsibility, the work of taking care of not only the citizens of SLO, but our natural surroundings. I ask you to make the hard choice, which I actually think is an easy choice, to make a decision in favor of preserving our natural reserves. It is an important symbolic gesture that signals in the minds of all of us that you favor respect of the Chumash lands and saving our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Janine Rands and then Wendy Lucas.
Unmute. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm calling in because no one in the report has mentioned the threat of fire. This summer, the South Hills Open Space had a fire. It was announced about 4:30 in the afternoon. For like 4 hours, the hillside and all those homes had to be evacuated. Hundreds of people and their lives were disrupted by a fire. And I started Googling. The fire was started in the Bridge Street area. So it was, I think it was named the Bridge Street Fire. Earlier last year, I'm getting double playback here. I'm not sure why. The fire above Shell Beach Road was started.
I think you've muted yourself, Janine.
Madam Mayor, I think what's happening with Ms. Rands, I think it appears she's playing it also from YouTube and also on Zoom. And so we're getting the delay and the feedback between the two. So Ms. Rands, if you're also watching on YouTube, if you could mute that and just work via the Zoom application, that'll minimize any sort of feedback. We do need you to unmute your microphone.
Thank you, City Manager.
Yeah, for some reason I'm getting two players.
We do need you to unmute your microphone.
Does that work? No.
Do you have yourself on a phone and a computer, or
I just turned my phone off.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, should I start over?
Sure.
Yeah, earlier this summer, we
heard you got as far as the Bridge Street.
Okay, Bridge Street fire, yeah. And I used to be a neighbor in that neighborhood for 5 years. And so I felt the fear from my friends that all, we were texting and driving, concerned about them. And then at Shell Beach earlier, above the 101 freeway, those $1 million homes were all threatened by a fire that came right down to the homes, and the forest firefighters went through heroics to save all those homes. In the event of a fire that's human caused, San Luis Obispo has thousands of $1 million homes all along that ridge. We cannot allow night hiking because we've already found evidence that students are taking up barbecues and doing little fires. They're smoking. Let's do some pot up in the hill. You throw one cigarette out on tinder dry land, and there's not a lot to burn, but when it burns, it ruins everything for everybody. And night hiking, day hiking would be ruined by a horrendous forest fire. I cannot understand why fire wasn't introduced in the report as one of the hazards for night hiking. I beg and urge you to consider that as a major problem. So thank you for turning me on.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Wendy Lucas. Wendy, you need to select the button that pops up on your screen. Oh, there you go. You did it. Thank you.
Okay, I can't tell, am I on? Uh-oh.
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, Hachu, Misa Saksi. Hello, my friends, Mayor Stewart and City Council members. My name is Wendy Lucas, and I'm a member of Yaktichu Tichu Yaktolhini, Northern Chumash tribe of San Luis Obispo County, and a 35-year resident of the city of San Luis Obispo. Thank you for this opportunity to address you on this very important and critical decision about Cerro San Luis Mountain. 2 years ago, I addressed this body from my perspective as a physical therapist. I've worked with folks having had devastating spinal cord and head injuries, and my fear that the mixing of hiking and mountain biking at nighttime would be a recipe for other such life-changing traumas. I was happy to learn that during the trial period, there were no such serious injuries, but it does not mean that the risk has gone away. Tonight, I will focus from my Indigenous perspective. Indigenous people speak of learning to be in relationship with the land, to honor its gifts that are abundant. Oftentimes, that means just simply to be present and listen, to reconnect and learn the lessons nature has to teach us. And if there was ever a societal need for this reconnection, it is now. But we must also honor the land's gifts to other creatures in the homes it provides for so many. And it is for the wildlife that I am called to speak tonight. Many papers and much research has been done demonstrating how our human activities encroach on wildlife. The number of disappearing species each year is immense. The causes are numerous and some are still unknown. But what is known is the importance of what happens at night. In those darkened hours, foraging, nesting, and other grounding activities, there are life-promoting behaviors for wildlife. Activities that the presence of humans impairs or destroys. I'm sure that all who participate in daytime hiking of this mountain must be aware of the gift it is, but it is what happens at night that is so critical. There are also other voices who will not be heard tonight, those who have spoken from the science community in the past and have been so disheartened by the lack of attention being paid to the science that is available about the deteriorating effects of our human behavior on natural resources. The alarm has been sounded if we choose to listen. An ominous reminder of the climate change story. And in that big issue, we are all in actions large and small, playing a part to speed things along or slow it down. Personal responsibility does matter. I tried to find a compromise with those who wish to pursue nighttime activities on the mountain, even just simply hiking. But the literature is too clear regarding the negative impact on wildlife for me to support even hikers at night on Cerro San Luis Mountain. In closing, I ask that you please help protect the land, the animals, the birds, the plants, now and for future generations, and to please vote no. I ask you to love this mountain and this wildlife community so much that you will do everything you can to protect them.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that. City Clerk, are there any other people wishing to speak?
Madam Mayor, I'm not hearing the clerk. I do see a Miss Jessica Jontos, who is requested.
Me too. Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and promote her over as a panelist.
Great, thank you. Jessica, if you can hear us.
Unmute.
Oh, there you are. Yay.
Hi, this is Jeff Jantos on my wife's Zoom.
Hi, Jeff.
I represent the Central Coast Concerned Mountain Bikers and the community members at large who, when the open space was set up that it would be a public asset for the public of San Luis Obispo to use. And we've heard some eloquent speakers tonight, and they were very well spoken, and I appreciate what they said. To the second one about the fire risk, I don't think there's a fire risk difference between nighttime or daytime. People smoke daytime and nighttime, and so there's not a big. Obviously, fire is a risk at any time of the day on any of our mountains and our open spaces. But should we close them all so that we can't use them? That's not what the public wants. The public wants access, and that especially during the winter time, there's only about 9 hours of daylight during the year during the summer during the winter, compared to 14 hours of daylight during the summer. So during the nighttime or during the wintertime, there's not enough time to go use our open space for the people who go to work every day. And obviously a popular activity that we have talked about is the annual Christmas tree that goes up on the top of Madonna Mountain. And that thing's run by a diesel generator all night, puts out light all the way till about 6 o'clock in the morning. And there's no greater disturbance than what's going on with that and with the 17,000 cars that drive by Madonna Mountain every single day. A few extra hikers, a few extra mountain bikers being able to access their city open space for 2 more hours in the wintertime is a great service to the residents of San Luis Obispo and our adjoining visitors who come here to enjoy the great place that we get to live, all the amazing open space that we have. They should be allowed to have that time in the evening hours during the winter. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, City Clerk, if you are back.
I'm back.
Okay,
So we have
great
one
to hear
more.
you.
We have one more speaker, and I would like to ask those in attendance if you would like to speak, if you would raise your hand now so we can get an accurate number, because after this speaker, we will be taking no more. Okay, Christy O'Hare, I'm going to promote you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy O'Hara. I am a lecturer at Cal Poly in the Department of Kinesiology and Public Health. I'm also the president of the Central Coast Concerned Mountain Bikers. We as a group and a lot of community members are stewards of the land, and we volunteer and take care of the trails in the city, a lot of the county and state parks in our area. This isn't a good versus bad argument. We care about the land, we care about the wildlife. We're just asking for a few hours after work until 8:30 p.m. on a small portion of land. I hate that it's become such an argument, and I don't want it to be that way. But I think as a community, it is the right decision to make. Most of that mountain is accessible via private land, which they allow the community to use. And the community members will continue to access those private trails via trailheads that aren't necessarily easily accessible or in community neighborhoods where there's limited parking. Having safe access via a parking lot that the city maintains and safe access to the trailhead would be more beneficial and safer than having residents, community members access via other trailheads to access the mountain and see the city lights in the evening during the Christmas month. That's about all for me. I know I've submitted quite a few letters, but I did want to make that one last point and thank everyone. And, please don't hate on mountain bikers. I know there's a lot of hate out there. We volunteer and do a lot for the community. and I want to continue volunteering. I'm young. A lot of us out there are young, and have lived in SLO a long time. I've lived here for over 10 years and are the future of the community. So I thank everyone for their time. I thank staff for all the time that's put into this, over 3 years of communication, and appreciate everyone and appreciate the support. And I appreciate those other community members that have come out and spoken. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like we've had all of our public comment. Staff, is there anything you'd like to respond on before we go further? Looks like no. All right, are there any questions or conversation from my colleagues? Councilmember Pease.
Sure, I'll start. And I appreciate staff's additional work. I think that we, at the last meeting, did hear some information that we didn't necessarily know the impacts of that. So I appreciate the thorough additional analysis and review in terms of the baseline number, the offsite impacts, and some of that academic research and the impacts there. So thank you for that. And from the additional outreach to, and then from the Yaktuhini Northern Chumash tribe to be able to hear that perspective. I so appreciate that, and I hope that we do continue to continue to build more connection, more points of connection, and more opportunity to learn from Indigenous traditions as we go forward. Because I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I hear the new information, the prior information, lots of correspondence, and just my own feelings on this have not changed since our meeting a couple weeks ago. I do think this is an appropriate program. I think that it does hit a balance of access, and that we do that we're, again, I won't go over all of my remarks from last time. Is just to say that we have a whole lot of open space with no human introduction, a lot of open space that has trails, and then this one small piece that has a few extra hours in the evenings. And I think that's appropriate, and I think it gives folks that connection to nature at a time that's really stressful, and that people need connections to nature. And I think there's a certain amount of containment that this actually, like some other well-loved public spaces, that there's that permitting helps to kind of keep the numbers down. So I think that will be helpful for us in being able to meet the interests of the community, especially working families, and be able to meter it out over those winter periods. So I still support the motion, including the change to have it be a permit system for the entire winter period. And I'd be happy to make that motion when we're ready. If there are other folks have commented.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease. You hit almost all the points that I was going to hit. I appreciate the extra energy that staff put into looking into more studies and documents that many of the members of the public put before us at our last meeting. And I was really hoping to see some more data and understand the academic research behind what might be happening in this open space in these extra hours. And I think that if to those members of the public who maybe didn't have a chance to go back and read the staff report, the staff did a tremendous job, and our consultant did a tremendous job of really analyzing all the angles of all of this, and really putting together a localized perspective on what's happening in our particular mountain and in this particular case. And again, as Councilmember P said, I won't reiterate all my comments from the last meeting, but this is only 118 acres out of 7,500 or so that we have conserved as a city. And I hope that we have many, many more coming in the future to add to this. And I think that there is a place for having just a few extra hours in the evening on this one small piece of property. I don't believe that it's a slippery slope and that it means that we are going to open spaces in other nature reserves, or that would ever be appropriate. And that maybe there are some reserves either now or in the future that we would want to have no presence on and truly, truly keep just for conservation. But that's another discussion at another time. I've been a long time backpacker, 20, 30 years. And I think having a permit system is a way that is well-founded to protect wild places while still being able to allow people to enjoy and learn from them. And there's no better way that I've found to teach my son about the outdoors than to have him out there in it and teach him how to preserve and respect and take care of those wild places and leave no trace. And so I hope that if we are passing this program tonight, that there will be lots of extra education, teaching people how to behave in the reserve so that we can preserve it for generations to come, and teach everybody how to act in these wild places, to respect both the land and the other people using it and the animals that are living in it, throughout the day and into the nighttime hours. So my opinion hasn't changed, but I do appreciate all the extra energy that's been put into this, both by the public and staff. Again, I am just so grateful that we have a community that loves our wild places as much as I do. And I think that's become quite clear through all of this. So I'll end there.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Wait, hold on. Thank you. I also want to thank staff. I think this has been an extraordinary effort on their part. And I am going to address a number of issues, and appreciate your patience. So what I want to say is that on or off City Council, I have a 30-year record as a strong supporter of two really excellent environmental programs: open space preservation and the creation of hiking and biking trails. I've worked with residents, environmental and active transportation groups, and prior councils. I've advocated for open space protection, like the recently protected Meosi Open Space Natural Preserve. And I've also advocated decades for the railroad safety bicycle and pedestrian trail. And I'm happy to see the trail bridge finally going over the railroad tracks. All the previous councils on which I have served, and this is my 13th year of serving on City Council, all of them have invested in expanding our open space program, strengthening open space protection, and increasing hiking and biking trails. Except what we're considering tonight, which is actually weakening protection, in my opinion. However, until the issue of allowing night biking and hiking in open space arose, there's been little conflict between these two climate-friendly policies. And the project that we're considering tonight has polarized and politicized these policies and divided the community. And this really, this really breaks my heart. If the project is permanently approved tonight, it will likely start battles over open space uses far into the future. So I'm hoping that tonight the council will have listened to the eloquent public testimony and thought about it and stand by the general plan and the open space and conservation element, which states that preservation of natural resources is the first priority of open space and recreation is secondary. I hope that my colleagues will heed the wisdom of the Chumash and allow Cerro San Luis Natural Preserve to heal from human intrusions after dark and continue the program. Just a moment, please. So it's important that this program not be permanently baked into our municipal code. I can understand the argument that it's small, a small area, it's just one place, it's popular. However, I think we are looking at setting some really dangerous precedents and that we are on the verge of disrespecting the hard-fought and expensive effort it took to acquire and preserve the city's open spaces over the years. So I wanted to say that I do strongly believe that changing open space law to reward illegal conduct sets a dangerous precedent. And the fact that this activity was occurring despite the open space regulations is not a valid reason to change the regulations or the law to accommodate it. Illegal activity in open space should not be rewarded by changing the law. I'm aware that I inadvertently offended some people during our last meeting on this issue, so I want to address that issue first, this problem first, so that it doesn't distract from the consideration of this very serious issue. Some people submitting agenda correspondence attached images to their emails. Those who were opposed to the program attached images of nocturnal wildlife, which deserved protection at night on Cerro San Luis. A few people in favor of night hiking and biking emailed images of people sticking their tongues out. Now, to me, those images were disrespectful. I understand that some people think that that's good, clean fun, but for me, the way I responded to it, I found it disrespectful. And I was struck by the difference between these two attitudes. And I held up camera images to the camera printouts expressing these very different attitudes. And I want to apologize for offending people and for the comments I made comparing people illegally accessing open space to other groups illegally conducting an illegal conduct and then asking for the law to be changed. However, the principle stands, in my opinion. It was inconsiderate of me not to anticipate the impact it could have on members of the public and especially the people in the photo, which they did submit as part of public comment. I did not intend to offend them, and I've apologized to them personally. However, I do not apologize for my strong opposition to rewarding illegal conduct in open space by changing the law to accommodate it. To do so, in my opinion, undermines the integrity of our open space program, and it sets a very dangerous precedent. What is the message this council would be sending if we approve this program? Are we telling the public that if they deliberately violate the law in open space in the future, the city will simply change the law to accommodate their wishes? I'm deeply concerned that making this program permanent encourages an attitude of territorial dominance toward our protected open space natural preserves. So here's a few of my grounds for opposition. One is nighttime closure of natural preserves is fundamental to protection. And closure of the protected natural preserves from dusk to dawn is a bedrock policy underlying all of the city's open space acquisitions. I have lived experience regarding the acquisition of Cerro San Luis open space for conservation purposes because I was on the Planning Commission in 1997. And our commission recommended the council approve the purchase of the property and the conservation easement over Cerro San Luis from the Mano family. Now, at that time, the residents and the council and the Land Conservancy as the conservation holder all relied on the fact that this special natural preserve would be closed to human intrusion from dusk to dawn year round. So we don't have to wonder what the heck was council thinking back in 1997. I was there, I know. Wildlife is accustomed to a steady routine of heavy impact during the day and relative peace at night, as Wendy Lucas and Jasna Johanovich have so eloquently reminded us. I just want to say that every granting agency, every individual who's donated money, every regulatory agency has relied on our open space program having this nighttime closure policy. It is a bedrock policy, and it's a crucial means of protecting nocturnal wildlife in natural preserves. What if another group of people or the same group of people decide that they really, really want to have nighttime biking and hiking in another open space? How would we have the grounds to say no? How would this council, having set this precedent, how would they have the grounds to say no? Also, the Chumash opposition, I think, is extremely important. It is very unusual for Chumash members of Chumash tribes to weigh in on city council issues. But tonight we've heard from at least two members of two different local Chumash bands. Now, I know this council and I personally have been longtime supporters of the Chumash Marine Sanctuary, and I was overjoyed to learn this morning that the federal government is listening to the Northern Chumash Tribal Council and has lifted up their marine sanctuary from the nomination to the designation stage, bringing it one step closer to reality. And I urge this council to also listen to the wise advice of Chumash regarding the need to continue to protect Cerro San Luis from dawn to dusk. And I'm not going to read from their testimony, or their emails, but they made some really very important points. First, the late Fred Collins, it was one of the last things he did in his life, opposed the project, and then his daughter and hereditary successor, Violet Sage Walker, reiterated that opposition. We've also heard from Mona Olivas Tucker and Wendy Lucas, who are, I'm going to say, Yaki Tutu members. I apologize for not knowing how to pronounce it, but it's the Northern Chumash tribe. So they've decided to speak up, and I think we should pay attention to them and discontinue the program. I also want to say that this open space program again and again has been city residents' #1 budget priority. It's what they're willing to have us spend general fund money on. It also was a huge factor in the passage of Measure G, the sales tax measure. And preservation of open space is part of our major city goal of combating climate change. So the other thing I want to say is that setting illegal use as an environmental baseline weakens protection. Prior to the first pilot program, when it was being considered, concerned residents and environmental organizations advocated for an inventory, establish an environmental baseline so that the environmental impact of the program, if enacted, could be objectively measured. But this did not happen because the program was only temporary, right? Only temporary. So it went on for 3 years, and the city has chosen in its discretion a technical baseline of 65 trespassers to make that be the status quo. I'm very concerned that our city is allowing illegal conduct to set the baseline of environmental analysis. This does not bode well for the future. The last thing I want to mention is that allowing this ordinance to be amended by resolution, if you look at the ordinance itself, creates a giant loophole, which is made worse by the language of the proposed ordinance. It says that the ordinance can be amended by a resolution. Such resolution may be subsequently amended by the council consistent with the purpose of this ordinance and the environmental review document supporting this provision, which means any Tuesday night, 3 city council members could say, well, let's not do 65 people, let's do 165 people. Or let's not make it 8:30, let's make it 10:30, or let's make it midnight, just by resolution, not by having to go back and actually change the ordinance. I feel that this is very dangerous. And when I asked staff about it, I was told that the intent was to downwardly amend or otherwise suspend hours to address misconduct of adverse behaviors. Well, the Parks and Recreation Director has that authority anyway. If you look at the ordinance, the open space ordinance, the director, which is the Parks and Recreation Department head, has the authority to, it says any section or part of the city's open space plans may be declared closed to the public by the director at any time and for any interval of time, either temporarily or at regular and stated intervals, daily or otherwise, either entirely or merely to certain uses as the director finds reasonably necessary. So I have to say, if you do decide, if the majority does decide to make this program permanent, that they should strike the language that states, or as such resolution may be subsequently amended by the council consistent with the purpose of this ordinance and the environmental review documents supporting this provision. There could be future environmental documents that don't limit it to 65 or that reduce the number. We don't know about what's going to happen environmentally to that open space. So in conclusion, I do have to say that I think this program is the proverbial camel's nose under the tent. And the council needs to seriously consider the long-term effect of lowering the standard of environmental protection of open space. To open up this Pandora's box is going to further divide the community and will likely result in battles over the uses of open space in the near and far future. So I urge my colleagues to vote no and to discontinue this program. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Christensen, do you want to respond? Okay, I didn't think so. Just want to make sure you had an opportunity. I do have a couple of questions. It was mentioned by Councilman Marks last week and this week, or last meeting and this week, about being this resolution and this ordinance change being illegal against our conservation open space element. So I just wondered if city attorney could maybe share about that. I would imagine staff would not put something forth that is illegal, but just thought it would be great to have that information shared.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. You are correct that staff would not recommend an ordinance that it believed was illegal. There are inherent tensions and consistencies throughout various aspects of our general plan, and the objective and the guidance under land use and planning law is that you attempt to reconcile those things consistent with the objectives of the greater whole. Staff has, pursuant to council direction, multiple times reiterated, tried to do just that. We believe that we have done a legally defensible job. We believe that we understand that there are competing objectives, and this was in fact attempt to balance those as best we could. And I don't obviously believe that it is an illegal action, or I would not have signed off on the action. But I understand that there are differences in opinion as to the weighting of various policies and how those potentially competing policies are appropriately balanced. Those are inherently policy decisions within the jurisdiction of the council.
Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to confirm that. And then there was one other question I had. Bob, would you mind just sharing? I remember the wildfire discussion we had a little bit in the October 26th meeting. Could you just expand on that again today? Because I know that our emails have been blowing up with that, and today's public comment also mentioned it.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Stewart. I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to address that as well. And to point out that the initial study checklist has its very own section on fire and natural hazards in general. So we did evaluate and provide some discussion about the potential for increased wildfire or for increased emergency response in general, and ultimately concluded that impact would be less than significant. And so therefore the preparation of the negative declaration remained appropriate in that regard.
Thank you. And the last thing around the wildlife nesting periods, I remember I believe it was October 26th, you had the chart of the majority of wildlife were not in their nesting periods or their mating periods during the nighttime during this winter period we're proposing. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if we were to look back at that presentation, we did show that chart, and or maybe it was in the staff report, I can't recall now to be specific, but certainly in the record of documentation that we provided to council through the duration of this program, we did definitely look at that issue, and that there were, obviously different nesting periods and mating periods for different species, and then some of those may or may not be directly affected by the program in their behavior as well.
Great, thank you. And just one last question. I thought I had one last question a second ago, but just remembering there was only one injury, right, in the 3 years of the pilot program?
That's correct. I didn't check with Chief Agson or with our dispatch in the last several weeks here, but during the course of the pilot program, during the published hours, we had one call for emergency service.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just trying to confirm with all the different questions and conversations I've had. So I really appreciate your time. And truly, I appreciate all the staff time taking extra, going through all the last additional questions and additional information sent. So really, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I also really appreciate, I was able to have a phone call with Wendy Lucas from the Yaktichutichi and tribe, and I also appreciated her 2 emails as well as Mona Tucker's emails. Yeah, and I have found a little bit extra challenge, I think, trying to figure out how do we balance this space of our open space and helping the community be able to access it when it works for them in their life as well. So really coming down to the, less than 3% of our 4,000 acres, it's a very small, nominal amount, which makes me say, okay, this seems like it's a compromise we can make. But going back to the resolution question that Councilmember Marks brought up, I do wonder the loophole aspect. Are we making it easier just to make another quick change, or would they have to go back? Would we, if there was a future council that wanted to make another change, would staff have to go back and do the entire research like we just did for this pilot program? Okay. I'm seeing the nodding heads.
And Madam Mayor and members of the council, we do have some suggested language because it's clear the intent of the council is to constrain the program to the Cerro San Luis area. And I think we have demonstrated through the last 3 years, there's been a rigorous amount of review and analysis, and I think we're approaching close to 10 hearings on this program. And so if the council wants assurances that this, and the community wants assurances that this program is just limited to just Sarah San Luis, it will require that. We've got some suggested language we can bolt on to the proposed ordinance.
Great, thank you. I would love to hear that language. You know, and I also look at, we talked at one point about having a little more additional education, and I know that partially we had more additional education just by having this pilot program and all the work that the Ranger program did, as well as rest of Parks and Rec. Is there any other education that staff or my colleagues that would be in favor of this program suggest?
Mayor Stewart, I don't want to jump in front of council members, but I just will say briefly that one additional thing that we did that was not present during the pilot program is if we were to proceed and we'll continue to use the permit system, as you apply for that permit in this new iteration, what we have proposed and is in the project description is that the recipient of that permit would have to acknowledge receipt of the rules and regulations and the special provisions that are in effect as a part of this program. So every time you go, so we're not just relying on somebody passing by the sign or seeing that or being generally aware, but they would have to acknowledge receipt that they read and understood those provisions.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Schwarzman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Stewart, for bringing up that question of Councilmember Marks. And it sounds like I'll be curious to hear what staff's recommendation is to change the language, because yes, I agree. I wouldn't want to make this something that could easily be changed. So I'm in agreement with that. Also, just for consideration, I think this was your suggestion at the last meeting, not that I would want to directly direct staff to implement this, but might be something for consideration. I know that you mentioned possibly additional signage around the reserve that might give people more, a gentle reminder of what some of the rules and educational points might be for taking care of the space, either at night or during the day or whenever. So just something for staff to consider in new educational efforts.
Thank you, Councilmember Schwarzman. I think that we could easily accommodate that. At the primary trailhead, we have the large kiosk panel, just custom made. We have a panel there just for the winter evening hours of use, but we could deploy smaller signage to other locations around the property if council so directed. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Yeah, I wonder if staff could provide this alternate language that was referred to earlier, so we can look at it.
Sure. City Manager Johnson and City Attorney Dietrich, what I could propose to do here is to bring up the exact language again on the slide, and we can do some wordsmithing right there in the document if that seems to work for everybody.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, Mr. Hill, if you wouldn't just, if you could just provide, I think it's just a slight addition to the language. So I don't know if you can narrow in on the ordinance or resolution section by which we would add that thing.
Very good. Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start by fixing the typo here, right?
Bob, I have the language up if you just want me to share with a red line, if you just want me to share my screen.
Oh, okay. If that would be easier, I'm happy to. Yeah, that would. I was going to key it in, but if you've got it already, let's do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, just give me 1 second. Is the council able to see that language?
Quite tiny. I know I'm still working on getting new glasses, but.
Well, let me
Can you
see.
possibly make it any bigger?
I
On the-
Lower, lower
On the
right
bottom
corner.
right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Whoop, a little too big there. Is that better?
Perfect, thank you. Hmm. I like that additional language.
If I could comment on that, it doesn't address the number of permits being issued.
I think that's within the scope of the program, but I'm certainly open to council feedback if you'd like some different or more explicit language.
I would just suggest that it says no amendment of such resolutions shall expand the number of permits issued, the operational hours, et cetera, et cetera.
Councilmember Pease?
I guess I'm just unclear what that whole sentence is doing for us in the first place.
It's just making very explicit that the parameters are set and this is a ceiling, not a floor. So you can reduce, but you cannot expand those elements listed by
You
resolution.
go to 7 p.m. but not 8:30.
Correct.
Or not 9:30.
So that's, I mean, wouldn't we be able to do that? I'm just wondering, as adopted on November 9th, 2021, period. Is this the only way to allow us to downsize it? Is that what we're saying? And so it needs to be in there in order to downsize it. And so then we're just putting on a cap to make sure that we don't us or other councils don't upsize it.
So I think there are elements of this program that aren't expressly articulated in the Parks and Rec Director's otherwise applicable authority to close open space. So it's a slight nuance, but.
Okay, yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
And I think, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Pease, the intent of the resolution is that we may learn through the course of administering this program that there are other constraints we want to place on it beyond what we have. And so rather than doing that by ordinance, this essentially allows us to constrain, not expand the program, and do that via a resolution action.
Yeah, I like that additional wording.
Okay, great, thank you.
I also like the idea of what Bob and Councilmember Shoresman were discussing earlier around the additional signage, especially due to the fact that many comments have shared that people get to this, our little sliver of open space by other ways. So if we had additional educational signage, I think that would be useful. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, so just to clarify with this language, one last thing. So it's my understanding then, so in order to expand this program at a later date, there would have to be a new ordinance. By adding this language, it makes the process of expanding this program more complex. Am I understanding that correctly? There would have to be a whole nother pilot, deliberation, ordinance, etc.
Not necessarily another pilot, but there would need to be an ordinance and supporting analysis to amend the ordinance, and that would be a two-step process with a 30-day following second reading effective date, rather than an immediate change being made with a single council action.
Perfect. Then I agree with the expansion of, or not expansion, with the addition of this language.
Thank you. Okay, I think most of my questions and answer have been answered. Councilmember Pease?
Sorry, I was about to make a motion, but I didn't know if you had any other comments, Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have. So in the end, I mean, I think why I am still supportive of moving forward, you know, I still come back to some of the conversations that we've had before around trying to help make our community more accessible to people who may not have the financial means in way many different parts of our community. And I think this is just one more of those, which is why do we want to have, you know, people drive out of our community to be able to get exercise after work, be able to enjoy the beauty of our community after work. So that's something that still really sticks with me. And I also find that, you know, when I was looking at the Northern Chumash page, you know, there was a section talking about how we need to acknowledge and respect the land that we are on as guests. I was thinking of kind of equating this to, you know, when you're a guest in someone's house, if their rules are take off your shoes, you take off your shoes, you know, whatever their rules are. And I feel like if we can help people understand the rules of this open space and how to take care of it and how to be stewards of it, then we are kind of doing our job in that additional aspect of protecting or keeping our open space safe and also accessible to the community. I think we are trying to do everything we can in this ordinance, additional language, so that this is not a slippery slope. It does not snowball into go ahead and use it wherever you want and go ahead expand it to wherever you want. And of course, we obviously have explicit language around no housing or buildings on here. Wildfire is, I think, a concern in daytime and nighttime. I don't think that by having 2 more hours, that's going to make wildfire better or worse. In fact, it's actually a little more moist in the evening than it is in the daytime. So I'm not sure that argument works completely for me. I'm, you know, fearful of our wildfire all the time. And I think that's why we work so hard, the staff works so hard to create, you know, wildfire plans and emergency plans, and continues to train and do everything we can to make things safer and preventable from the community. So I hear wanting to be able to keep our wildlife safe and let them do what they need to do. And I want to figure out how we can kind of make that little bit of compromise. And there's not a lot of great compromise, quite honestly, on this issue. So in the realm of trying not to have massive extremes, I think having the permits, the small amount of space, the trailhead access versus going onto this mountain, no matter where it's peak, no matter where you want to go onto it. I think these are things that will be somewhat helpful. So those are my comments for today, to not expand on, repeat everything else I said on the October 19th meeting. Councilmember Pease, I hear you had a motion.
Thank you. I do appreciate all the deliberation and comments of my colleagues. I have a great deal of respect for all of you, and I thank you for being a part of this process and for your respectful comments of the community as well. It really means a lot, I know, to all of us to be able to work together. I move the staff recommendation with the amendments as proposed.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Pease,
Yes.
Councilmember Shoresman,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
No.
Vice Mayor Christensen,
No.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. The motion was made by Councilmember Pease and seconded by Councilmember Shoresman, and passes 3-2. Okay. This is a short-term meeting. I won't call a break unless people would like one right now. Okay, great. Councilmember Shoresman? You have your hands up, but you're muted.
Oh, I was just going to jump ahead to the next thing. I thought you were starting with the next thing.
That's okay. I'm just about to. Wanted to make sure about the break. Cool. I can get back to where I need to. That'll be great. Okay. So, so the next public hearing is to receive council input on the decennial county and statewide redistricting. Councilman Pease, did you want to comment now, or would you like to wait till after the staff presents their report?
Pease or
Sorry, Councilman Shoresman. Shoresman, sorry.
Yes, Madam Mayor, in the interest of ensuring transparency and public confidence in the city's action on this next matter, although I'm not legally required to do so, because I do work for the County of San Luis Obispo, I'll be recusing myself from this item.
Thank you. Okay, well, City Manager, will you be presenting the report?
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Let me just go ahead and bring up the staff report. And so assuming you can see my screen, so I've got a brief presentation tonight. And the recommendation is to receive the staff report and provide direction to staff for input on the county supervisorial and statewide redistricting efforts. So by way of background, the staff provided a report that included a variety of information. Basically, what kicks off the redistricting effort for the federal and state and at the local level is the census. And so following the census, lines, at least in the state, are redone by a Citizens Redistricting Commission. The format of that is described in the staff report. But in essence, the Citizens Redistricting Commissioners are selected by an application process through the California State Auditor. Ultimately, 14 commissioners are selected to oversee the redistricting process. And at the county level, the fair and inclusive redistricting for municipalities and political subdivision requires cities and counties to engage in communities in redistricting process and hold workshops and public hearings. And so the staff report describes some of those hearings, and I'll describe the upcoming hearings in greater detail as part of tonight's presentation. So the last hearing occurred on October 26th, and we provided a link to that video archive at the county. The redistricting hearing evaluated 5 options known as the initial draft maps. Also, maps were submitted by the public, and a link to the staff report was included in the city staff report for this item. And I'll describe those maps, plans A through D. The first one largely being status quo with some minor changes to supervisorial boundaries to align with census blocks. Plan B, which is Cal Poly Community of Interest, places Cal Poly in one district, District 2, and makes other changes to balance populations and to provide ease in determining legal meets and bounds in District 3s and 4. Plan C is remove Cal Poly in the city of San Luis Obispo from District 5. And then Plan D is consideration of school districts and works to align districts to the extent possible. So these were the plans that were developed by the county's consultant, and they were described in greater detail, and there was Q&A between the board members and the consultant staff during the hearing. You may have seen as part of the staff report, our own GIS staff was able to obtain copies of the shape files that generated the various different options. We've overlaid those over the city because there were questions by individual council members about how those different boundaries would impact the city. And you can see the key, which is in the bottom left-hand corner with the color codes, tries to guide and help the council members in the community understand the city limits, the current district boundaries, the various different plans A through D. So hopefully you found this map useful. We tried to provide a greater granularity in terms of both landmarks and specific streets. And so if you need any help deciphering this map, we're happy to do that. But my recommendation is to leave that work to an ad hoc committee if the council is so inclined to form one. So that leads us to options for the city council. If the council provides input on the statewide efforts and the supervisorial redistricting staff recommends two steps. One is the first one, establishing principles for input for both statewide and for county redistricting, and establishing an ad hoc committee. Should the council decide to do that, we'd recommend that the ad hoc committee provide those comments in time for our next meeting on the county's next meeting for redistricting on November 19th. The fourth and final redistricting hearing that the county's proposing to hold is on November 30th. I did speak with county staff, and my understanding is that the county will be receiving comments up until November 21st on any maps that have already been submitted. And then you can see on this slide that the steps ahead to meet the statutory timeframe for redistricting is that the county is proposing to introduce an ordinance on December 7th, and then a second reading on December 14th. So that's the timeframe. And our recommendation is to discuss and provide direction to on whether the city of San Luis Obispo is going to provide input on the county and statewide redistricting efforts. I have two additional slides if the council needs them as part of deliberations. They are both the suggested principles for both the county and the statewide efforts, but I'll defer showing those until such time as the council wants to get into greater detail. And with that, Madam Mayor, that concludes the staff report.
Thank you so much. Trying to find my mouse here. Questions of staff, Councilmember Marks.
Yes. I had a question in terms of map A. Is that map still legally sufficient in terms of balancing the number of residents? In other words, is the status quo still, I'll say, kosher in terms of the legal requirements to balance numbers of residents?
And Madam Mayor and Council Member Marks, that's a great question. That was a question that was asked because there was a fair amount of debate that was in discussion at the October 26th hearing of whether all of the proposed plans, meaning plans A through D, were legally sufficient. And the response from the county's consultant indicated that the proposed Plan A, which is largely status quo, did comply with the requirements for redistricting because there wasn't a significant enough population shift to warrant changes to supervisorial district, notwithstanding the small realignments to align those boundaries with census tracts.
Councilmember Christensen.
Yes, thank you. And I'm going to maybe kind of ask the same question, maybe in a different way. So my understanding, kind of digging into this a little bit, is that if there hasn't been any changes from the census, that if there's no changes basically under over 10% change, then there isn't really any actual legal need or requirement to change anything. So, and we haven't had anything close to 10% change.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Christensen, that's my understanding, is that the census numbers as mapped out do not require the County Board of Supervisors to change the supervisorial boundaries. They could maintain the existing boundaries with the minor adjustments to just align with those census tracts. And they're very, very minor indeed. So the status quo supervisorial boundaries could suffice to meet the requirements under the law, is my understanding.
Okay, good. Well, that will be important when we get to feedback and discussion. Thank you.
And Madam Mayor and Council, just for the Council's further information, we will be working closely with our CIVRA Council, who's an election specialist, who is very versed, along with the demographer that's been working with us on the CIVRA issues, to make sure that we are understanding and identifying any potential legal defects with the various maps. That's one of the supports we'll be hoping to provide to the council subcommittee.
Even better. Thank you.
And since everyone's not always familiar with acronyms, CVRA, California Voters' Rights Act.
California Voting Rights Act. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. That's okay. Just, thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues? Councilmember Christensen, do you still have a question? Nope, there we go. Councilmember Marks.
Yes, I have a question about map B, and I have to admit, I was having a little trouble deciphering all the different overlays on one map, and it would be helpful at some point to get a separate map of each overlay so we can look at the actual streets and see what we're talking about. So with map B, putting Cal Poly completely into District 2, what would the ramifications be for District 5? Does District 5 then have more of the city's population? I wasn't able to figure that one out. Thank you.
Great question. I would need a moment to get back to you about the details. And so I'm pulling that up. In Plan B, District 2 does take in all of Cal Poly and a portion of San Luis Obispo. And District 5, as I can tell from the county's map, comes into just the northeastern portion of the city. And I'm looking at Plan B. I'm sorry, I don't have a page. It's page 99 of the packet to get that detail. But I don't know if that answers your questions, Council Member Marks. I would suggest that if the council's interested in getting the details, we might want to, to do that via the ad hoc committee. But that's my understanding, and we're happy to remap those on individual maps. Our attempt with the consolidated map was to be able to juxtapose those for the council, and we're happy to do that individually, but there was a mountain of paperwork that was already coming your way in short order, so we were trying to be mindful of not overwhelming you all.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can wait for that answer, but right now, District 5 has quite a bit of the downtown. And so I was trying to figure out if right now we represent about 20% of the, I'm in District 5, that's why I know about that. We represent about 20% of the voters in District 5. And so I'm wondering if Plan B would increase the number of city voters in District 5. And I guess all the districts, it would be interesting to know.
Can we talk about this later?
Sure.
Yeah.
We can talk about it later. We can talk about it.
As opposed to, just focus. It's 8 o'clock. I'm just already burnt out.
Well, in terms of my feedback, my first.
We haven't had public comment yet or anything.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
Are there any other questions for City Manager? Okay, then I think at this time we will call again for public comment. And I believe City Clerk, will you be able to take a look and see if anyone is raising their hand? This is the time to raise your hand. And of course, if you are called, please make sure to use that pop-up message and click the button that says promoted to panelists so we can hear you. City Clerk, are there hands? I see at least a couple.
Yes, it looks like right now we have 2. The first one will be Dave Cox and then Jim Gardner.
Dave looks different.
Ready to go?
Ready.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Maggie Cox. I'm a longtime city resident, a retired business owner, and a kind of out of practice public commenter. In fact, so out of practice that until a little while ago, I thought I was coming down to City Hall. So I just want you to know I have on my nice pants and my booties, but I'm happy to talk to you any way we can. So thank you for having us. I am actually speaking tonight on behalf of a group of people who submitted a letter expressing our grave concerns about the county redistricting process. You've received that letter. In it, we analyzed a number of the proposals, and we came to the point of view that the current boundaries are what should be retained. I'm not going to address that letter in detail tonight, but I just want to make a couple of comments about it. First of all, the boundaries as they exist are fully compliant with law. There is no need for the sweeping changes that are being considered and seem to have the support of a majority of the Board of Supervisors. There are some ludicrous proposals that are floating around that would make changes that would in effect gut the city of San Luis Obispo. It's absolutely unacceptable. And to someone like me who attended one of the recent hearings, it is frankly alarming. So we are coming to you tonight to say we think it's imperative that we come together, that we object to any plan that does anything to dilute the city's representation. Our city is more than just San Luis Obispo being a city. We are the county seat. We are a diverse population that ranges from students to families to retirees. Our business community cuts the gamut of mom and pops, tourism, agriculture, high tech. It's a very complex city, and it's one that the representation is working and it needs to be retained. And that's what we're asking you to help us with tonight. We are looking for you to step up, to be engaged, to speak forcefully, recognizing this is a very challenging issue. It's honestly kind of crazy, moving quickly, lots of changes. We need your voice. We need your forceful leadership for our community. We are so appreciative to see that you're considering it tonight. And I just want to close by asking you to formally consider, first of all, the subcommittee that you're proposing. We love that idea. We urge you to insist with the county that our 3 districts be retained, that the existing boundaries be retained, and that fairness and reasonableness prevail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have another?
Jim Gardner.
Okay, thank you.
Hard to do this when you sign.
Are you getting in the front?
Jim, if you're speaking, you are muted. There you are. You are still muted. I see you now, though.
Okay, how are we doing now?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Jim Gardner, a 34-year resident of SLO, and I'm still very proud to have been the Chief of Police of the city's police department from 1987 to 2002. It was an honor and it's a privilege to serve you. I'm here tonight because our nation and our community are being challenged by the most grievous threat to democracy in my lifetime. The political divides have grown so great that in many places, aggressive confrontation and violence have become the norm. We're already seeing the impacts in our own county with disruptions and harassment of school boards and flagrant abuse towards minority groups. And under the current conditions, a January 6th type event can happen anywhere. I'm concerned for everyone's safety, and not the least, as I'm very concerned for the safety of law enforcement personnel who inevitably get caught in the middle of these events. So you might ask, what does this have to do with redistricting? Well, it's a lot. Good faith redistricting, while always difficult in the moment, promotes unity, democracy, and trust. Bad faith redistricting does the opposite. While some county supervisors are touting how open and transparent the process is, there is good reason to believe that their real design is to give themselves the wide latitude to make the last minute changes and impose new districts designed solely to lock in their political partisan advantage for the next 10 years. Ultimately, their intent mirrors a national scheme to gain political power for specific agendas. Bad faith actors have discovered the best way to do this is to alter control of local government. Some will say, well, you just want to do the same thing for your side. Well, first, 2 years ago, I was a lifelong Republican. I'm now a no party preference person. My only side is for fair and equitable government. And second, Map B, the county's website, will essentially keep the same districts that have yielded right-leaning boards for the 11 of the last 15 years, including the last 6 years. My sole interest is to promote good, honest local government and nothing more. I urge this council to vigorously engage in this process. And while your subcommittee should begin trying to work cooperatively with the board toward a positive resolution, you must be ready to take action if that fails. Therefore, please direct your staff to provide you with a legal review of section 21,500 of the Elections Code, which defines what is and most importantly, what is not allowed in redistricting. I was very glad to hear Christine talk about her involvement already. That's very important. This council and this community must take an active role. We're counting on your leadership and we're here to help. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see you all.
Thank you. And good to note on page 76 of our packet, we already have been starting to discuss Code 21,500. So I'm sure we'll continue that in the subcommittee. City Manager, do you have any comments you'd like to add after the two commenters?
Excuse me, Mayor, we have one more public comment.
Oh, so sorry.
Ken
Go ahead,
Hampion.
City Clerk. Thank you.
Hopefully you can hear me.
I can. Now we can see you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to really just reinforce what Maggie and Jim have said. You know, one of the challenges with this whole process of redistricting is that it's complicated and it's kind of boring to a lot of people, and it's somewhat inaccessible. And that's exactly why redistricting is so vulnerable to manipulation and chicanery. Another vulnerability is that what might appear to be logical on the surface isn't so. For example, the idea that, you know, dividing a community into more districts automatically means more representation. So, hey, wouldn't it be swell if SLO is represented by 4 Board of Supervisors? All that would do is dilute our ability to influence within any one district. Or conversely, some people feel, wouldn't it be great if SLO is represented by just 1 Board of Supervisor member who had all the city within the district? Wouldn't that be a great way to go? We would have 1 person super passionate about San Luis Obispo. Well, that would be yet another way to marginalize the city. And what I learned listening to a League of Women Voters webinar yesterday is when populations are isolated like that, they're called sink districts. So, you know, don't let us become a sink district. That's what I would urge the subcommittee. 3 is best, as Maggie said. It offers us solid representation. We've had that. And it also helps avoid spin-off negative impacts to other parts of the county that we should care about as well. As Maggie said, this process is moving fast. There's maps being, I think maybe we've reached the end of maps a little, but there's a lot of them out there. So it will, and the time frame is compressed, It kind of runs through Thanksgiving, the holidays. So your subcommittee will need to be able to act fast. I think it's good that you have principles that they could work within. I would ask that you look at the 4 recommendations that we suggested in our letter to you as well. There's some recommendations there that might add a little more detail to the subcommittee's input. And with that, I thank you for your interest and for this time.
Thank you so much. City Clerk, are there any other public commenters?
No, there are not.
Thank you. Councilmember Christensen.
Yes. All right. It's getting late. We need to be moving. Time for some action.
Before you have
so
action.
Funny. One night we're discussing one thing that we've been discussing for 3 or 4 years, and then we're also discussing something that's come up fast and is moving quickly. So I kind of didn't say much the first time, but I'm going to say a little bit now. I do believe we should write to the Board of Supervisors. I do think that time is of the essence, and so I do support the formation of an ad hoc committee. I would love to volunteer for that committee if anybody is interested in having me. I appreciate the staff's effort on getting those 4 principles laid out. I think they're a good start. I think they're probably sufficient to give the ad hoc committee enough to go on. Given that we also have some other information, as our city attorney mentioned, and we know we're going to get good public input. I think that the most important thing in terms of the 4 principles, besides things like maintaining 3 districts and that kind of stuff, is to make sure that our public and our community, as well as our board of supervisors, really understands the legal situation here. I think it's very, very important that they understand that there is no legal reason, given our census data, to find a balance, find a solution, get a compromise. Those words have been used, and it's very confusing to me because there isn't any need for a solution because there isn't actually any problem, as has been pointed out by several of our speakers. We've got good districts. It's worked well. We have gotten a swing and different kinds of boards. I don't really think that anything besides the status quo is useful, and I think we need to make that clear. And that's why California has laws about redistricting, unlike some states where you can basically just use political reasons. We can't do that here. We have to. It has to be based on the census, and it has to be based on those kinds of logical, rational data points, not just on willful desire. So I think that's very important to point out in terms of pointing out they need to follow the law, which is the first principle listed. Other than that, I think I've kind of made my points. I don't think as you guys could probably already tell, I really don't want to spend a lot of time going over the nitty gritty right here. I don't think we need to. First of all, but I think if we are going to talk about really nitty gritty stuff, as opposed to general principles, that we should do that in the ad hoc committee room, not here tonight. And I also just wanted to say that I do think it's very important that we stay fair and respectful of our board as they make this decision. I think it is their purview. But I do want to just make sure that they know the city is very interested in a legal and a fair process, and that their final decision is made on legal and fair grounds. So that's my thing. Now I've lost my words, and I'm ready to go when you guys are.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. I agree with Councilmember Christensen's remark in that it's important to be involved. I think we will need to hash out the principles at the ad hoc level, but I think that there are some basic principles that I would imagine that we're aligned with, and just which I think we're actually in pretty good shape in the staff report in terms of what we're looking for. I think in terms of the ad hoc, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'd also be happy to serve. I think it's important for our mayor to serve if she is so interested. As the mayor, I would defer to Councilmember Christensen though, if she has strong interest and experience, which I think she does. Happy to serve or not serve as the will of the group would move forward. Those are my comments.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Are you still pondering council remarks?
We didn't hear you
I
say
didn't-
anything, Erica, to her.
Yeah. Well.
Oh, really? Weird. Okay.
I have the floor briefly. I just want to say I totally agree with Councilmember Christensen's remarks. I just want to make sure when we're talking about an ad hoc committee, or we're just talking about 2 council members, we're not talking about adding community members to that group, are we? We're just talking about, okay, a council only. Okay, so I think Councilmember Christensen would be great, and also either a Councilmember Pease or Mayor Stewart. I just don't want Mayor Stewart to get so burdened down by her duties that she burns out. So I think this is a good direction. Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? It's like the question of the year. I also agree that I think it's important for us to share with the Board of Supervisors what we think about the redistricting, not just how it affects the city of SLO, but also how it affects the county of SLO. As we have been deliberating and discussing many things over these last couple of months, we have seen how people live and work in different places and are affected by the whole county. And I'm happy to serve. I actually am taking some time off from the 19th through Thanksgiving. So I'll have some time to spend with either Councilmember Christensen or Pease to really focus in on this before we reach back out to the Board of Supervisors. So I just think this is a very important issue. And as we continue, I just think that we need to make sure we are strong and sharing what would behoove the community. Councilmember Marks.
Christensen.
Marks had her hand up, that's why.
Oh, yeah. I just would like to nominate Carlin Christensen and Eric A. Stewart to be the ad hoc committee. And I'm willing to make that motion when the moment is right.
I was just going to
Thank you.
ask whether we need a motion or how we're supposed to be doing this, Derek and Christine.
Yeah, Madam Mayor.
And I'm happy to accept the nomination.
Yeah. Madam Mayor and Councilmember Christensen, I would suggest that the council members appoint via motion the ad hoc committee, and then concurrently, if the 4 principles that we've established for state redistricting are good guidelines for the council, that you also embrace those, and then also embrace the 5 proposed principles for supervisorial districts.
All right, I'm willing to include those in my motion.
I'll second.
Great. City Clerk, do you mind calling the roll? It was motion by Councilmember Marks and seconded by Councilmember Christensen.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Christensen?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, and the motion passes 4-0, 1 recusal. If Councilmember Schwarzen would like to come back, she is welcome to
Thank
come
you,
back.
you guys.
I can't believe you're thanking us for that, but
just wanted to just move it through tonight. This is a special meeting, not a regular meeting.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for your time. And as this is a special meeting, we won't go on to all the normal liaison reports, et cetera. we'll go ahead and move to adjournment. So the next regular city council meeting is scheduled for November 16th, 2021 at 6 p.m. via teleconference. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and have a good night.
Teresa, you're going to get a hold of us for meetings?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.